Hello, my friends. This is Alex. Welcome to Socialism Survival Podcast number 43. I have a special guest on this show. His name is David Wendell. He is wilderness survival instructor known internationally through his Bushcraft on Fire YouTube video channel. When I first heard David on the Survival podcast in the interview with Jack Spirko, I was impressed in the way that made me think. This man has greater passion. He has something more to say, something that connects with my own story of socialism survival. You want to know what is that? Then keep listening, and you will hear about it from David himself when I will introduce him after the following segment of virtual housekeeping and community organizing. I invite you to check out my website, socialismsurvival.com. I will appreciate your feedback. Please write me to podcast@socialismsurvival.com. Please support this show, but more than that, support your country by spreading the word and introducing others to this show. People equipped with the knowledge of truth will make America safer and more prosperous. Hi, David. Welcome to Socialism Survival Podcast Show.
Good afternoon, Alex. It's good to be with you, my brother. And we're real pleased to be able to speak to your listeners and to help them out with their survival skills and bushcrafting.
I'm so pleased to have you on my show. And as I said previously, I was really impressed with your interview on Survival Podcast. But I know this show will not just copy that show. We will have something more and something different. And in some things that I noticed in your videos, in your site, in your life, there is something special I want to talk about. But first, just introduce yourself a little bit more to my listeners and tell about your life, about what you're doing, about Bushcraft on Fire.
Well, thank you, Alex. I am David Wendell with Bushcraft on Fire. And my wife and I and our children are all involved in bushcrafting. Of course, we don't just go out once in a while and practice the skills. We actually live the skills daily here on our little place. And we've been involved in bushcrafting, studying, and teaching since about 1992. So we've been in it for quite a while.
Wow.
What we're doing right now is we're just trying to build a base, Alex. We do teach classes throughout the year. I guess we have 6 or 7 classes that we do. But our main thrust at this point is doing the videos out on YouTube. They're no cost. And you can just go to YouTube, Bushcraft on Fire. We right now have over 200 videos up on all aspects of wilderness survival, bushcrafting, and even some things on living off the land and living on a farm. So we enjoy doing it. Those videos are free of charge, of course. People can just go out and watch them and hopefully learn some new skills, learn some techniques, some understanding and the mindset of what bushcrafting is all about.
Yes, as you said in your website, you are about wilderness survival. I actually, maybe it's my English knowledge, but I want to see why it's like wilderness, not desert survival. Is there a difference?
Wilderness and not desert? Well, first of all, because we don't live in the desert.
Yeah, that's true.
And we probably wouldn't choose that. But if we had to survive in the desert, you know, a survival mentality, Alex, will take you into whatever situation you're in. And if you have a good mental mindset, a positive, I know that I can do this, I have a basic understanding of many skill sets, and I feel that I'm going to make it through this situation, you probably will. If you get out there and you panic and you think, you know what, there's just no way I'm going to do this, I'm in a place that's not native to me. I don't understand the desert. I don't know what to eat, where to find water. It's hot. I'm probably going to die. You probably will.
So the biggest problem is when people panic, right?
Absolutely, Alex. Bushcrafting is all about your attitude. It's all about mental preparation. And that's why it's important for people, even if they don't think they're going to be out in the bush a lot. We deal with people that are in corporations a lot, different people that are in different avenues of life. And they've all said the same thing. These skills don't just help us learn how to survive in the bush. These skills help us in life because it builds self-confidence. It teaches us how to think in a positive attitude. It teaches us how to be aware of what's going on around us. How important is that in our lives?
I think most of American peoples, they think that life is still comfortable enough, and they think, why we need these skills? Do you think that those skills are for everyone to learn, or just for people who like outdoors?
Well, as I said, Alex, you never know what kind of a situation you're going to be in. Take 911. There were people that lived in comfortable homes. They're in the big city, an urban environment. They're not out in the bush whatsoever. But if they had learned some skills, it possibly could have helped them. Now, I understand that's not necessarily the best example, but how about Katrina, where all of a sudden there was no water, or all of a sudden you were put into a tent city and you had to live? I wouldn't live in a tent city, brother. I would just walk away and live out in the bush for a while, because tent cities are really not the best place to have a family environment. So, these skills, you never know when an earthquake's going to happen. You never know when a tornado, we live in Tornado Alley here in the Midwest, is going to occur. A hurricane down on the south end of the country, possibly a snowstorm on the northern end that puts you out of commission. We've got many reports of people that have been without electric over the past couple years for 2 weeks at a time, Alex. Can you live without electric? Do you know how to go out and start a fire to cook your food? And these are things we take for granted that our ancestors lived every day. I mean, until 100 years ago, throughout the course of history, there was never anything such as electricity. You had to heat your home the way you had to heat it. Sometimes maybe better to get out of your home into a shelter outside if it's a situation where you can't handle in your home, and live primitively for a little while. And if that's for a week or 2 weeks in the face of a crisis, you will know how to do that. So yes, I think the skills are for everyone to learn, Alex, but people say, well, we never go outdoors. And I don't really buy that argument. Do you ever get in your car and drive? Do you ever have a situation where you're off the beaten path, wherever you're driving, not right dead in the city? Is it possible your car could break down? And if you're in an isolated area and your car breaks down, would you know how to make a shelter and how to find some water until someone finds you? Especially if it was very cold or if it was very hot. So it's good for everyone to be able to practice these skills, to understand these skills.
Another thing, if everyone will be willing to take it, because so many lazy people over there who just want to sit on their couch and watch their TV.
Right. Well, a lot of people will never go out and actually do these skills. When we practice and teach skills, we tell people, even if they come to a class, they get hands-on learning, they sit with us, they get a fire started. I tell them, you need to go home. You need to practice this over and over and over. Even today, I sit down with my son and we do hand drill fires and bow drill fires and practice flint and steel and build shelters just for the fun of it, to keep the edge there. You're not going to learn by watching a TV show. You're not going to learn by going to a class or reading a book. You're going to learn by getting dirt time in for yourself, by practicing. And those people that will not take a class to get the basics, those people that will not even read a book, we call that the cleansing of the gene pool. These people in a crisis situation are not going to make it, probably. There's some people out there that could because they know how to think, Alex. But for the most part, people, they're just going to go crazy. And if we have a mass epidemic, some kind of a problem here in our country, like many countries have had much more uncomfortable lives than we as Americans have. They've had it a lot harder. They have had situations come up in their life where, for example, over in China, they have to walk for 2 days just to go to a church meeting, or in Russia, where they can't speak out publicly for fear of their lives. And so there's many different scenarios, and I believe that's possible, that certainly could come to the United States in our lifetime. If so, then we've got to change our mentality and our way of thinking and try to escape this super comfort that we've had and that we've been used to as a people.
Yeah, speaking about the past and remembering my life in former Soviet Union, there were many situations where we had to survive. But I also remember that as a children, we didn't know something like what you teach, knowledge, but we naturally were doing some things like building camps with whatever we find, making fire and cooking food with whatever we'll find. And still, when I watch your videos, I know I'm just checking my past and I see where I would act differently if I had that kind of knowledge. But one thing I know that I survived because I didn't have the fear. And of course, with the help of God. And on your YouTube channel links, I see you link directly to your ministry website where I found that God is your first love. And while introducing you, I didn't say anything about that because I want you to tell my listeners what it means for you.
Absolutely. We call the Father by his name, Yahweh, and he definitely is the mainstay in our life. We are very spiritual, and we don't necessarily preach that over our Bushcraft on Fire videos, but I think that people can see it through our lives. People that know us see that we have faith in the Father. Actually, the Bushcraft on Fire stemmed out of our ministry, Alex, back in 1994 or so. I felt the Father tell me that there would be some catastrophic events that would take place in the future, and that he would like for me to help learn so that I could help prepare people, possibly lead people through these times, and be an influence on them for good. We don't feel that faith and wilderness survival are separate in any kind of way. In fact, we tell people often, if you want to have a spiritual experience, go out into the woods for about a week with no one else around. Uh, and, Alex, I believe, everybody doesn't necessarily agree, but I believe that we are a spiritual people in
Yes.
our very inner core, in our nature. And if someone doesn't believe it, that's fine. But they still have faith in something. And usually it's in themselves. So we all have faith. We all have this kind of inner longing to be at peace, to be aware of what's going on around our lives, and to some people want to be in control. We tend to trust the Father for His control and to watch over us. But whatever a people believes, there's still a spirituality to the entire understanding of bushcrafting, of survival.
I would like to send my listeners today to Hebrew 11. This whole chapter is the history of survival of God's people. And verse by verse, we can read by faith, by faith, by faith. I've noticed that here in America, many people who do any kind of business, they do not want to mention God and their faith because they think if they do that, they will lose their profit. What do you think about this, David?
Yeah, I believe that faith was very strong in our society, Alex, up until the past maybe 30 or 40, 50 years. And it's tended to take a back seat because of the persecution. Of course, we don't have persecution the way that they've had it in other countries, but I can see that coming. You're not really free to speak out with your faith. And, I'm not convinced, Alex, that our faith is something we should go out and push down other people's throats. I think that every man has a right to believe what he desires to believe. And as he believes that, then he has to grow where he's growing. I can't be the spirit of Yahweh to other people. They have their opportunity to grow and to make their decisions. But I believe that for the most part, as I said earlier, many people are a people of faith. Just some of them are more inwardly because of the fear, maybe, Alex, because of the desire not to have people get angry or upset with them. I've met a lot of people that I really didn't think by just what I knew of them that they were very spiritual people, and having spent some time with them in the bush, found out they were very spiritual people. And so I think that faith and skills work together, as I said earlier. And, it's an individual thing. It's not something that we need to go out there. I know in other countries, the USSR, Soviet Union, the Ukraine, China, Korea, these different countries where there's great persecution, the people don't openly speak about their faith to other people because they could be killed if they did. And I think that people in a way kind of fear that.
I'd like you to share with my listeners some specific skills that you teach at Bushcraft on fire and what they can learn from your videos.
Absolutely. The first thing we teach, and probably the most important, as I've already alluded to, Alex, is the mental attitude that we have. Your skills are pretty easy for the most part, but that mental attitude is not easy. If you found yourself in a crisis situation, if you panic, you're probably going to not make it. If you can stay calm, keep a good mental outlook, understand that, okay, I'm in a different situation than I've been in my life, but I'm going to be able to do this. I'm going to be able to get through this. This is just another phase. And that's where it really takes a lot of faith, Alex. Sometimes there's really a lot of faith because you're suddenly thrown into that unknown. So that is the most important skill that I can teach people, is a positive mental attitude, a good bushcraft mentality,
yes,
as well as how to be aware. Because if you're out there in a situation without any kind of gear, or even with gear, you have to be aware of things around you. For example, your plane goes down and you're up in the north somewhere. You want to make sure that you're not on an area where you're going to cause an avalanche if you take a step. Or if you're in the area where we're in, you want to be aware that you're not walking into an area where you're going to be covered with ticks and chiggers, or that you're not walking into a copperhead den. If you're in the desert, you want to be aware of things such as where water would be, where rattlesnakes would be, and different things like that to protect yourself, to be able to gather materials. So those are the two most important skills that I think people need to learn. After that, of course, we teach the basic four, which are shelter, and along with shelter goes fire. They go hand in hand. Then how to get water, and how to get food, and how to make different kinds of tools and implements from nature if you need to make those. Of course, we also do a lot of primitive or naked into the bush kind of work where you go out with nothing, maybe just a knife or maybe not even that. And you have to be able to have all your needs. When you're in the bush, you can't just walk down to the grocery store to buy some food. You can't walk to the Five and Dime or to the, I aged myself there. You can't walk to the Family Dollar or the Walmart and try to get materials. You have to be able to make your cordage. You have to be able to make your axes, your saws, your knives. You have to be able to make your bed. You have to be able to make your clothing. You have to be able to find different materials to make a shelter that will keep you dry and at a temperate level so you don't either get too hot in the summer or too cold in the winter. And all of these skills work together in order to live the life that we basically live right now in our homes, except instead of making and utilizing these things, we go out and buy them. We don't have to start a fire. We turn on a switch and the fire comes on. We don't have to, make a blanket for our bed. We can just go over and buy one at the Walmart for $25, and then you have a blanket. You don't go out into the bush and buy and get your food, but you just run down to the local McDonald's or grocery store and get some food and take it home and eat it. Well, in the bush, you have to understand that the bush is your supermarket, but you have to know how to get the things from it and what to do with those things in order to live the way that you're used to living. We don't believe in survival. We believe in something called Sirthrival, where you go out and live, not just live, but live in comfort.
I tell you, Russian people are very good at some of that, like especially going in the nature for food, to get berries, nuts, mushrooms. That's big part of annual activities of the people there, and it is very interesting to find out that here in America there are some people who care about that. Well, I want to take you to the situation back in USSR many years ago when my grandfather and my father, they were taken by Stalin regime and gulags, and they were in a very harsh situation in the camps in the north or far east, where are very cold winters. And of course, me myself, when I was forcibly taken in Soviet army and then was persecuted and tortured there, I had to run for my life, and I encountered many dangers. And I remember my dad told many stories. And of course, you can read some stories in Archipelago Gulag of Alexander Solzhenitsyn, how people survived in the camps and how many people they attempted to run away from the camps. Some of them survived, but many of them died, and maybe not necessarily. So I'd like you to imagine yourself in this hypothetical situation, if you are okay with that. You are in Gulag camp in Siberia, sentenced for your faith. The temperature outside is minus 30 or even minus 40, and you have only chance to run away. And how you would prepare when the time and resources are limited and primitive, and of course snow and low temperature. What would you take with you in order to survive? Cold, hunger, beasts, and many other things. Maybe you can take something with you, but of course, to run and to escape, you really need to go light.
Sure. First of all, Alex, let me say that the Gulag camps in Siberia and different prison camps around the world, we don't think much about that here in our country, but it's a possibility that people could be thrown into these situations. And a lot of people travel overseas, and we've had Americans that have been in foreign countries, but it could come to our shores as well. There's anything that could possibly happen in the future. And so this is a great hypothetical scenario. And while I've never been in the military here in the United States. I certainly appreciate the people that have, but I have studied some of their techniques. And one of the main things that you understand if you're in that kind of a situation is that at all expenses, your first job is to try to escape. And so if I was in that situation, I would definitely try to escape. Now, how would I do that? How would I prepare? First of all, I understand that, my time, my resources are very limited, and I'm going to have to live primitively. So the first thing that I would do was to prepare mentally, Alex. If you're not ready mentally, you're not going to be ready, and I've said that already.
Yes.
So I would take time praying and preparing mentally with meditation, different things. I would actually go through what I was going to do over and over and over in my mind so that when I got into the situation, I would be ready for it. And I would have already lived through the situation. So all I had to do, as it were to follow the steps that I had already played in my mind. Now, as far as preparation, I would gather what materials I could. If I was in a camp, hopefully I would have a blanket. Possibly I would have a mattress with some stuffing on it. If that's possible, I could make some different kinds of clothing materials. One of the things that I would not want to do is to wait too long to move, because in those situations they purposely don't feed you enough. They want to tear down your body. They want to
Yeah,
tear you
yeah.
down mentally. And so I would try to act as quickly as I could, but to be as prepared as I could at the same time. If it's possible that I could find some kind of a couple pieces of metal that I could fashion a knife out of, or something to use as a tool later on, that would be great. I think if I had tools and clothing, that would be the very minimum. I mean, if I could get my hand on a few nails or some kind of aluminum foil, a cup or a bowl.
Yeah,
Uh,
depends on what job people were doing. Some were working on the construction where they probably had access to axes or hammers or nails, or some who had shovel job. They probably could hide the shovel somewhere, you know.
exactly. I mean, you're not going to, they would never miss a nail or two here or there. And those things later on could be forged into makeshift drills, makeshift knives. You can use them for all sorts of metal implements that you would need. And so if you can pick small things up off the ground, but I would also want to get to know very quickly the area that I was in. What kind of trees were there that I could use for rope, for example? What kind of rocks were there that I could use for knives or axes, hammers, things like that? What kind of materials were there if I needed some extra clothing, or if I needed insulation for in my clothing? And so I would gather a small amount. I wouldn't take any more than I could carry in my pockets or a very small sack. And the reason for that, of course, is I would be on the run for quite a while. Once that I escaped, if I did it covertly, I figured that I would probably have 2 to 3 hours before they knew that I was gone. If I did it overtly, then they would be on my chase immediately. So I would have to do it very quickly. And, I would, as I said, just take a minimal amount that would not slow me down, but that would give me enough for the basics, something to gather water in, maybe a knife if I could, and possibly some cordage.
When you escape such places, of course, they would soon chase you, and probably even with dogs. How you would hide your path of escape, and would you use something like I've heard people use the tobacco to divert the smell senses of dogs, something like that. Do you have something?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that actually can mix a dog up because a dog's main sense is its smell. And so if you could in some way cover your scent, that would be great. The chances are, Alex, you're probably not going to be able to cover your scent. And so if I had the capability, I would probably find a river as quickly as I could and go as far as I could down the river before I would get out again. And that may help cover my scent a little bit. If I could get up in a tree and cross over a river, that may slow them down. If you're going against dogs, you're probably not going to win unless you're very blessed and unless you really have everything going your way. And if they're firing bullets at you and everything else, I guess the best thing to do at that point is to pray.
Yes, so that's why I wanted to talk to you about faith and connection with survival experience, because there are some situations when you used everything you had and you knew, and the last resort and maybe the only help would come from God, right?
Right. You probably would not want to leave prayer as your last resort there. But as they say, there are no atheists in foxholes or in airplanes that engines just cut out.
I agree with you. Of course, when you run away from such places, such camps, as I remember, people really could not trust other people who live around the camps because they knew they would be betrayed and turned over. So you really need to find the way to shelter. Well, first to run as far as possible and in some remote place, and then settle there in the way that you won't be noticed and where you will be able to provide for yourself before you work out further plan how to get somewhere where you need to get.
Absolutely. You know, there was a gentleman a few years back in North Carolina. His name escapes me at the moment, but he had, I believe, blown up an abortion clinic, and
Oh,
he disappeared into the woods, and he lived for a long time out there. His final takedown was because he spoke to some people. Now, he had a lot of people on his side, and people would actually give him some food, put food out for him, and he moved around. So he proved that it can be done, and he was actually in a very limited area. But if you open your mouth, Alex, that's a really bad thing. You don't tell your plans to anybody except the Father. And I mean, you're in a life and death situation there. And of course, I think one of the things that you need to understand in a situation like that is, all right, life is going to end sometime. It could end today. And so you need to be mentally prepared for that as well.
how you would provide the food for you when there is such a deep freeze and deep snow?
Where would I get food from?
Yeah, yeah. When like you are in Siberia and there's a lot of snow and the snow is very deep, so it's hard to get something from the ground, and the ground is frozen, of course. Like in the
Right.
winter situation, in the cold.
Yeah, well, I'm not familiar with Siberia, honestly. I've never been there, but there are mosses that grow on rocks, reindeer lichen, and different things that you can eat up there as starvation food. Of course, we have a teaching in our food section that we call the Big Four, and that is grasses, cattails, and oak trees and pine trees. And those things can help to keep you alive. Nuts, different drinks from pine needles and spruce needles. You can also uh, gather different grasses. All grasses are edible. So if you can get down to the base layer and get yourself some grass and boil that up for a while, it will certainly give you some nutrients that you can use to live. I mean, look at animals out here like deer and cow, elk and moose, caribou. That's what these animals eat are grasses, and they're pretty big and pretty healthy. So we could do that as well if we thought about it. But you need to know how to extract those juices out of there, and basically that's just by chewing on them and swallowing the juice, and then spitting out the grass itself, the cellulose that your body can't digest. So there are a lot of things that are available, Alex, but not knowing that area, I would just have to go at that point by faith. I mean, I would just have to look around me and take note of what was there. And if I knew it was not something poisonous, test it out, see if it would be a food source.
The next thing I would like you to mention, and maybe you to say something on that, like fishing and hunting. I remember my dad when he was in Gulag camp, they would go to the river, and in the river they had salmon that was coming from Pacific Ocean, and they would take sharp stick and just throw it in the fish and catch fish that way because they didn't have any other like fishing tools or something else. What would you do in that kind of situation that we described in the winter? Probably like could you build or make primitive fishing or hunting tools beside what I mentioned, like sharp stick?
Well, that's an easy answer for me, Alex, because I happen to be a vegetarian now. I like that I can sneak up on these plants and pick them and they don't run away from me.
Okay.
But Could I make traps? Yes, I know how to make different traps. I do know how to make different weapons, such as a kunai, a throwing spear, a bow, an arrow. I know how to make things like throwing stars, things that could take down game, a throwing stick, a rock, a deadfall trap. I've hand fished, where I just reach into the river and pull fish out by hand. I know how to make line and I know how to make hooks. So if it got to that point, yes, I suppose that I could find some wild game. People that rely on wild game in a primitive situation, a lot of times find out that there's not as much wild game around them as they want there to be. And so if that's all that you can end up being in trouble. But remember this, Alex, you can live for 30, 40 days without any food. You only have 3 days without water, but you can live an awful long time without food. And so unless you're planning on basically disappearing from civilization, you're probably not going to be out there that long unless you're in some kind of a scenario where you escape from a camp or something. But even then, 30 to 40 days, you should probably be able to make it back, from behind enemy lines and get back somewhere in civilization. So basically, you need to know direction finding, need to know how to find some edibles to get you through. But you could live a long time without food if you had to.
So you can melt the snow, for example. You can use it for your water source. So,
Absolutely, absolutely. You can just melt snow in your pockets,
yeah.
You put a bandana in your pocket and put the snow inside there. The bandana will get wet. Then you can suck the bandana and get the moisture out of it. You never, of course, eat snow directly because it cools your body core temperature down. But if you're able to have a fire and you're not having to be covert, then you can melt the snow. And there's lots of ways to get water out there.
I was watching your videos, and probably the last video I was watching, it was to make some pots with a clay, and you are still in the process of finishing that series.
Actually, yes, we're just editing that video. Well, the video has been edited and printed. And when we're finished with this radio broadcast, it will be going up online. So I can actually tell the people we had a catastrophic failure when we were firing the pot.
Oh.
And it blew up on us. And we were really blessed, actually, because we got to view the entire process on the video.
Wow.
So you can see the pot blow up on the video. It didn't really blow up so bad. It didn't explode into a million pieces, but it broke. And so it was a learning experience. You have a very slim chance, I guess 50-50, either it blows up or it doesn't blow up, of getting that pot correctly done. So yeah, we did put the whole video series up by now. By the time this is aired, it will be up. And you'll get to see through the end of that process. But pottery is a very good skill to know. Of course, there's other things you can use to make baskets that will hold water, that will coal burn different kinds of trees or branches or things. And so you could use skins from animals to hold water in. There's a lot of different things that you can use out there. But pottery is a very good skill to be aware of if you get a chance to play with it. And it's free. It's all around you. There's clay in the ground everywhere you go.
What are other future plans with Bushcraft on Fire? And also, what kind of events are coming?
Okay, well, our future plans immediately for Bushcraft on Fire are we have a Pacific Northwest gathering coming up, and that will be in August. And then we're going to have another minimalist camp, I believe, in September, which we've not yet announced. We do, as I said earlier, 5, 6, 8 dates per year right now, just a little over one every month and a half or so. And we have lots of get-togethers. Of course, we're going to continue with the videos. We have something like 200 or 250 video requests right now that we need to get to. So it takes time, though. It takes 5 to 6 hours to shoot a video, to edit it down. And, you can't just do them all bang, bang, bang like that. It takes a while. We would like to grow, of course, as far as doing more classes, having larger classes. We possibly will be doing some radio shows in the future. That would be a great thing. other podcasts such as yours. And, just keep teaching people, Alex. That's what it's about. We're not here to make the big bucks, so to speak. If that comes, it's nice, but we're here to try to pass on these skills, to try to help others learn how to be able to survive in every situation of their life, not just in the bush, but even if they're at home with their family.
Great, and I'm looking forward to watching more of your videos. Whether I will be able to go somewhere or not, but I'll definitely will follow whatever you do with videos and your website. By the way, could you tell my listeners where they can find your website and how they can contact you?
Absolutely. The best way to find us is go to youtube.com and type in Bushcraft on Fire, or you can just type Bushcraft on Fire in your Google and it will pull up many, many hits about us. So that's the easiest way to contact us. On our website there on Google, on YouTube, we actually have a link over to our website, which is www.yahwehswordoffaith.com. And that will take you to both sides, the faith side as well as the survival side of our website. And you can also find our contact information out there, our email, as well as our phone number if somebody needs to call us personally for something.
For you as a survivalist and also a believer and as a pastor.
Yes, sir. We have an online ministry.
That's great. So for you as a survivalist and a pastor and man of God, what would be the best Bible portion that would describe your passion and what you do with Bushcraft on Fire? Do you have any?
I would say start at Genesis 1 and read through Revelation 22.
Great answer.
I can't say this is the best or that's the best. It's all the Father's word. But if I had to narrow, if I could only say one thing to people, I would say without faith, it's impossible to please the Father. That we need to believe that He is and that He will reward us if we will diligently seek Him. And that is Hebrews chapter 11, verse 6. That would be one of my biggest verses. The other one, the Messiah said over in Matthew chapter 11 and verse 20 through 24, he said, whatever you believe in your heart and whatever you confess with your mouth will come into being for you. And, if we could get those two thoughts into our mind, into our heart, then I believe that it would change our lives. People don't understand that right now they are getting everything that they believe and confess, whether it's good or bad. And so we confess it, we believe it, we speak it, it's going to come about. And that's a good lesson that we could learn in our lives. If we're in a place where we don't exactly like where we're at, change what you believe, change what you're speaking. A lot of people we run into, oh, it's flu season, I know I'm going to get the flu. And guess what happens? They get the flu. They believed it, they spoke it, and it came into being. And I know some people don't believe that that's truth. I can't change the words of the Master.
It's the word of their faith. If they believe in sickness or in a problem, they most likely to get into that.
Absolutely. And, again, we have that capability to trust the Father, to trust what He said. He said in Deuteronomy 28 that we could be blessed in everything that we do if we would be diligent for Him.
Well, David, thank you for coming on this show. I'm pretty sure my listeners got to know you. And of course, those who got interested, they will go on Bushcraft on Fire YouTube channel and will find more. And in this country, as I'm confident, we are facing difficult times. And what I want to close this podcast, I'd like you to pray for me and for my listeners and for this country.
I'd love to do that, Alex. And before I do, thank you so much for having me on the show. It's been my honor and my pleasure. And I hope that we can do this again sometime. There's so much to share. You can't just put it into a 20 or 30-minute format,
Sure.
It's a lifelong learning experience. So thank you very much, my brother, for having me with you.
I'm happy to have you.
Thank you. Let's go before the Father in prayer.
Amen.
Father, we thank you so much for this time you've allowed us to be
Yes.
together. We thank you for being able to record this for eternity, not only on tape, but in the hearts of those that hear this. We ask you right now to touch Alex, to touch his ministry. Help him, Father, to have that faith, to know that all things are working together for his good because he loves you. Help those that are hearing this, Father, to have their lives transformed, to be encouraged. Maybe they've been discouraged, depressed in their lives. Maybe they have felt like they can't do it any longer. Give them the peace inside of their heart that passes all understanding. Let them know that there are people out here that they can turn to that care about them, that will uplift them, that will uphold them, that will bless them, and help them most of all to trust in you as their supply, to trust in you and to have a faith that you will bless them as they serve you, Father. We thank you so much for the beautiful land that you've given us. We thank you for the freedoms that we
Yes, Lord.
have.
Thank you.
We ask you to please continue to protect us, to guide us, to walk with us, to help us to be aware of which direction to turn, where to put our feet, and what to do with our lives. We thank you most of all, Father, for you just being you, for watching over us, for keeping us safe. And we ask you to continue to be with us until we meet each other again. And we praise you and thank you for it in the mighty name of our Master Yahshua. Hallelujah.
Amen, brother. Amen.